The alien giantess seemed impossible to satisfy, until a human's magical touch unleashed it. The air shimmered with the hum of anti-gravity engines, energy streams, and the soft chatter of the inhabitants. Zyphora was a world of marvels, a place where science and artistry intertwined, yet despite its perfection, the planet had one problem no one could solve: the moods of the Grithians, the colossal beings who ruled the land. Among them, Lorelia was known above all. Towering like a living mountain, her presence could make the ground tremble and the wind wail through the city streets. Her eyes were vast pools of color, shifting and swirling like distant nebulae. Every step she took sent tremors through the ground, and every gesture could spark panic or delight among the smaller inhabitants. Despite all the technological wonders of Zyphora, no device, no spectacle, no offering had ever succeeded in pleasing her. Citizens had tried music, art, fireworks, even grandiose mechanical creations, but all efforts ended in failure. Lorelia's expression, a mixture of curiosity and aloofness, always returned to neutrality, or worse, mild irritation. On one such day, as Lorelia strolled along the outskirts of the city, the ground beneath her enormous feet quaking slightly, a low murmur spread through the crowd. The Zyphorians, though accustomed to giants, still watched with a mix of awe and fear. Towering above the tallest spires, she tilted her head as if listening to some music only she could hear, her gaze sweeping across the city like a tide of calm or storm. Amidst the gathering crowd, a small figure moved with purpose. Captain Elias Harrow, a human envoy from Earth, stepped forward. Humans were known across several star systems for their ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience, and though Elias was smaller than Zyphorians, he carried the quiet confidence of one who had faced impossible odds. His uniform bore the insignia of the Interstellar Human Council, and strapped to his back was a compact toolkit that seemed almost laughably tiny against the enormity of Lorelia. "Captain Harrow," said the local official, a tall Zyphorian named Zelen, his voice echoing like a bell. "Are you certain you want to approach her? She has rejected all attempts before, even the holographic monuments." "I know," Elias interrupted gently, his brown eyes steady and calm. "I've read every report, studied her patterns. I think the others have been trying too hard to impress her. Sometimes the hardest challenges are not about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about understanding." Zelen raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Understanding, she is a Grithian, Captain. They have no need for small beings. They are indifferent to us." Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but indifference can change if approached with care. I'm going to try." With that, he moved toward the edge of the city where the earth itself seemed to rise and fall beneath Lorelia's presence. Every step she took sent ripples through the streets, and citizens instinctively ducked or scrambled for higher ground. Yet Elias did not falter. He had trained for situations like this, though never on a scale quite so colossal. He stopped at a safe distance and observed Lorelia. She was pacing slowly now, her attention shifting from the horizon to the scattered structures of the city. Her massive hands grazed the tops of the tallest towers, brushing them with a touch so light it was almost imperceptible. Yet for those who watched, it was enough to know that her interest had been caught, if only slightly. Elias adjusted a small device strapped to his wrist. It was designed to sense emotional resonance, a primitive tool, yet useful for gauging the feelings of beings far larger and more complex than humans. The readings fluctuated wildly. Lorelia was calm one moment, intrigued the next, then seemingly bored. Elias noted each shift with meticulous care, understanding that the key was not force or grandeur, but observation and patience. He cleared his throat and spoke, his voice calm but carrying clearly across the open space. "Lorelia," he called, choosing her name carefully as one might a melody. "I have come not to impress you, not to demand your attention, but to understand." For a long moment she did not respond. Then, almost imperceptibly, she paused, her massive head tilting slightly. Her eyes, cosmic and deep, focused on him. The wind stirred around them and the distant citizens held their breath. There was no fear in Elia's, only steady curiosity. He began to recount stories of Earth, tales of humans who built cities in the clouds, traveled across deserts and oceans, and discovered beauty in the smallest things. He spoke of music and laughter, of art and invention, describing not with grandeur but with genuine wonder. The Grithian's reaction was subtle at first. A flicker in her eyes, a slight lean forward as though drawn closer by the words. Elias continued, speaking softly, with care in each syllable. He noticed that Lorelia's massive hands, which had hovered listlessly, began to move almost imperceptibly, tracing patterns in the air. She seemed curious. The city around them remained tense, citizens watching with awe as a human dared approach a being no one else could influence. Yet Elias remained calm, letting the stories flow naturally. He realized that the Grithian's previous irritability was not malice, it was boredom, a lack of connection. She had seen wonders before, yet none that engaged her mind or spirit. Hours passed as Elias continued, occasionally pausing to observe her subtle reactions. The sun sank lower, painting the city in hues of orange and gold. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lorelia's lips curved, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that those watching could tell. She exhaled a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the ground. Zelen and the officials exchanged glances, astonished. "Could it be?" Zelen whispered. "She's responding." Elias nodded, careful not to celebrate prematurely. "Yes, but slowly. This is not about speed, it's about connection. Watch, but do not interfere." Over the next several hours, Lorelia's interest grew. She began experimenting, reaching down to interact with the structures and devices Elias had brought, not as a threat, but as curiosity. Each interaction seemed playful, deliberate, as if she were testing the waters of this new kind of engagement. Elias, in turn, responded with care, adjusting his stories, his actions, and his devices to match her reactions. By nightfall, the city had quieted, the glow of artificial lights casting soft shadows across the landscape. Lorelia, towering above all, finally sat down on the outskirts, her massive form curling like a protective mountain over the smaller structures. Her eyes, now calm and soft, focused on Elias. For the first time, a human had reached a Grithian not with force, technology, or spectacle, but with empathy and understanding. The air itself seemed lighter, the tremors gentler, and for the first time in generations, the citizens of Zyphora felt hope. Elias approached cautiously, standing at a distance respectful of her size, yet close enough to continue the delicate exchange. He spoke softly, sharing stories of human achievements and simple joys alike, simple gestures, acts of kindness, moments of quiet beauty. Lorelia listened, occasionally responding with a low hum or gentle gesture, indicating her growing interest and engagement. By the end of the night, a subtle shift had occurred. Lorelia, once impossible to please, had shown the first signs of connection. Not only had Elias survived the encounter, but he had also begun to unlock something the Zyphorians had long thought unattainable, the happiness of a Grithian. As the first stars of Zyphora's twin moons sparkled in the sky, Elias looked up at the towering figure before him. There was still much to learn, many challenges to face, and countless ways in which this fragile connection could evolve. But in that moment, he allowed himself a quiet smile, knowing that understanding, human ingenuity combined with empathy, was a force greater than any technology or display of power. And so, under the vast expanse of alien skies, a human and a Grithian began a journey together. A journey that promised to change not only their lives, but the future of Zyphora itself. The impossible had begun to seem possible, all because one human dared to reach out, not with strength or spectacle, but with care, patience, and the simple magic of understanding. The next morning, the city of Zyphora awoke to a sense of cautious excitement. Word had spread quickly among the citizens. A human, small and seemingly fragile, had reached a connection with Lorelia, the Grithian who had long been considered impossible to please. Markets opened with a hum of anticipation. Children peered from high platforms, and even the scientists, usually reserved and methodical, gathered to discuss the encounter. Captain Elias Harrow had spent the night observing Lorelia from a safe distance. Though she had settled into a relaxed posture, he knew that this calm was fragile. Grithians were creatures of immense curiosity and rapid mood shifts, and a single misstep could undo hours of progress. Still, he allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. For the first time, he felt that his approach, based on observation, patience, and empathy, was working. Lorelia, now fully awake, stretched her enormous limbs, the motion causing a gentle tremor that rippled through the city. Her eyes, those vast pools of shifting colors, turned toward Elias. She emitted a soft, rumbling hum, almost like a greeting. Elias responded with a smile and a wave, keeping his gestures small and non-threatening. Zelen, the Zyphorian official who had been skeptical of Elias' methods, approached cautiously. "Captain," he said, his voice tinged with awe, "she hasn't reacted like this before." What did you do?" Elias shook his head. "Nothing extraordinary," he said. "I simply listened, observed, and tried to understand her. The Grithians are not like us. They react to connection, not spectacle. They notice subtle emotions, subtle intentions. That's what I tried to give her." Zelen frowned, clearly impressed but still puzzled. "Connection. From a human? How is that even possible?" Elias shrugged. "Perhaps humans are small, but our minds and hearts can reach far beyond our size. That's the magic she responded to." Lorelia, curious as ever, began exploring the area around her. Her massive feet pressed into the ground, leaving deep impressions in the soil, and the citizens watched from a safe distance. She leaned down to inspect a small cluster of buildings, tilting her head as if examining intricate patterns. Elias followed her carefully, keeping his movements gentle and deliberate. He noticed that she was drawn to unusual arrangements, patterns that were not necessarily grand but thoughtful. A small garden designed in spirals, a series of reflective surfaces that caught the light just so, even the way people had stacked supplies in neat rows, all of these seemed to attract her attention. "Interesting," Elias murmured, making notes in his portable device. "It's not the size of the creation but the thought behind it. She responds to care." Over the next several hours, Elias began experimenting cautiously. He arranged objects, created small patterns, and introduced subtle movements to see what would capture Lorelia's interest. Slowly she began to interact more actively, using her massive hands to move objects, tilt structures, and even create new patterns. Her curiosity was no longer distant, it was participatory. For the citizens of Zyphora, this was unprecedented. No one had ever seen a Grithian engage in such playful behavior. The city hummed with excitement as engineers, scientists, and artists gathered to observe, taking careful notes while ensuring their creations were safe from her enormous movements. Elias, meanwhile, kept his attention fully on Lorelia. He spoke softly, sharing stories of humans discovering new lands, building cities, and finding beauty in small acts of kindness. His words were simple yet sincere, and he noticed a subtle change. Lorelia began to emit soft hums in response, almost like laughter, and her massive hands moved with a sense of rhythm and care. As the day progressed, a pattern emerged. Lorelia was happiest when she observed acts of thoughtful creation or participated in gentle, meaningful interactions. Large, flashy displays did not impress her, but careful attention, subtle artistry, and small, deliberate gestures captured her interest. Elias realized that this was the key. Grithians were not drawn to power or spectacle, they were drawn to understanding and care. Around midday, Elias suggested a small challenge. He placed several large, lightweight blocks in a pattern and invited Lorelia to arrange them as she wished. She approached slowly, examining the shapes and colors, then began moving them with surprising precision. The blocks formed a spiral, expanding outward, and the process seemed to bring her joy. The hums she made resonated through the city, and the citizens felt a rare moment of unity and awe. Zelen approached Elias again, this time with a smile. "It's working." "She's happy, isn't she?" Elias nodded. "Yes, and it's not just happiness, it's engagement. She's participating in creation, not just observing it. That's a deep connection." The afternoon brought new opportunities. Elias experimented with combining human creativity with the scale of the Grithian world. He introduced floating light sculptures, simple mechanical devices, and colorful patterns designed to shift and move as Lorelia interacted with them. She responded with fascination, sometimes adjusting the designs herself, other times moving them in ways that surprised Elias and the citizens. Through it all, Elias remained calm and patient. He did not rush the Grithian, did not try to control her actions, but instead observed and responded thoughtfully. Lorelia, in turn, began to show trust, allowing him closer and responding to his presence with subtle gestures. As evening approached, the city's lights reflected off Lorelia's massive form, creating a breathtaking sight. Elias realized that this was more than just a moment of success, it was a turning point. Humans and Grithians could communicate, not through language alone, but through understanding, empathy, and shared experience. That night, Lorelia settled in a quiet area outside the city, her enormous form curling protectively around several structures. Elias approached cautiously, carrying a small device that projected soft patterns of light and color. He knew that the Grithian's attention span was limited, and overstimulation could cause her to retreat. He projected gentle shapes, circles, and spirals, moving slowly and deliberately. Lorelia's eyes followed the patterns, and she extended a massive hand to interact with them. The hums she emitted grew louder, more musical, resonating through the city and reaching the ears of everyone nearby. Elias realized that this was the first time anyone had succeeded in sustaining Lorelia's attention for so long. Not through power or spectacle, but through careful, empathetic interaction. The Grithian was not only interested, she was engaged. As the stars appeared in Zyphora's twin moons, Elias reflected on the day. The progress had been remarkable, but he knew there was still much to learn. Lorelia's moods were complex, her reactions subtle, and one misstep could undo everything. Yet he felt a quiet confidence. He had discovered the principle that worked: patience, observation, and connection. The citizens of Zyphora, meanwhile, began to see the Grithian not as a threat, but as a being capable of joy and understanding. Children left small gifts in the streets, artists created gentle patterns for her to explore, and scientists continued to study her reactions, taking notes and learning from Elias' methods. Elias spent the night preparing for the next day. He created new patterns, planned gentle interactions, and reflected on the importance of empathy. Humans, he realized, had a unique gift: the ability to understand beings much larger, older, and more powerful than themselves, not through dominance, but through thoughtfulness and care. The following morning, Lorelia was awake earlier than usual, her massive form stretching in the dawn light. Elias approached with a gentle smile, holding a simple set of floating shapes designed to respond to her touch. She reached out, interacting with them in ways that were both playful and thoughtful, and Elias observed, taking careful notes. It became clear that the Grithian was beginning to enjoy the challenges. She experimented, created new patterns, and even initiated interactions with Elias. The small gestures, the hums, the shifts of her eyes, the careful placement of objects, were all signs of growing trust and engagement. Zelen watched from a distance, astonished. "Captain," he said softly, "you've done what no one else could. She's learning or perhaps understanding us." Elias nodded. "Not just understanding us. She's connecting. That's something no machine or display could achieve. Only empathy and care can create this bond." The day progressed, and the citizens witnessed something extraordinary. Lorelia, the Grithian once feared and considered impossible to please, began to smile, small, subtle, yet unmistakable. She interacted with the city in playful, gentle ways, and her hums resonated like music. Elias realized that the bond they were forming was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a demonstration of human potential. Humans, small and fragile, could reach hearts and minds that seemed untouchable. They could create understanding where others saw only indifference. As night fell, Elias and Lorelia shared a quiet moment. He projected a gentle light pattern and she interacted with it, her hums resonating softly. It was a simple exchange, yet profound. Through observation, patience, and empathy, they had begun to build a bridge between species, a bridge of understanding, creativity, and connection. And so, under the twin moons of Xiphora, the human and the Grithian continued their journey. Each day brought new challenges, new discoveries, and new opportunities for connection. Elias knew that there was still much to learn, but he also knew that they had taken the first steps toward something extraordinary. A world where humans and Grithians could understand, respect, and even delight in one another. For the first time, the impossible seemed possible, and the citizens of Xiphora dared to hope that the giant, magnificent being who had once been feared could become a friend, an ally, and a symbol of what connection, empathy, and understanding could achieve. The next day dawned. Bright and clear over Xiphora, the twin suns casting long shadows of towering spires and sprawling gardens. Captain Elias Harrow awoke early, his mind already focused on Lorelia. The Grithian had slept through the night near the city outskirts, her massive form curled protectively around several smaller structures. Despite her size, there was a calmness about her now, a serenity that had been absent just days before. Elias approached slowly, taking care not to startle her. He carried a set of lightweight structures designed to respond to touch and movement, along with a small device capable of projecting subtle patterns of light and color. The goal was not to impress her, but to engage her curiosity, to invite interaction without overwhelming. Lorelia stirred as he neared, her immense eyes opening and focusing on him. She emitted a low, resonant hum, one that vibrated through the ground and even through the bones of the smaller beings nearby. Elias knelt at a safe distance, speaking softly as he arranged the floating patterns in front of her. "Good morning, Lorelia," he said. "I have something new for you today. A challenge, but a gentle one. Just explore and enjoy it." Her gaze followed the shapes, circling in spirals and shifting gently in response to his gestures. Elias noticed her hand hovering above one of the structures, unsure whether to touch. He held still, letting her decide. Slowly she reached down, brushing her fingertips against the floating pieces. They responded instantly, shifting and rearranging with every movement. A hum of delight resonated from her chest, vibrating the air like soft music. Elias smiled quietly, taking careful notes. He had observed her reactions over many hours, and a pattern was emerging. Lorelia responded most strongly to interaction that allowed her to create and explore, not just observe. Citizens of Xiphora had begun to gather at a safe distance, watching with awe as the Grithian engaged with the patterns. Children pointed excitedly, artists whispered among themselves, and engineers noted every movement. Yet despite the crowd, Lorelia remained calm. Elias realized that her growing trust extended not just to him but to the environment itself. She no longer perceived the city as a threat. She perceived it as a space to interact and experiment. "Look at that," Zelen whispered to a nearby engineer. "She's learning to play." Elias nodded subtly, careful not to distract Lorelia. "It's more than play," he said. "She's expressing herself, and she's responding to understanding, not commands." For hours they continued. Lorelia experimented with new shapes, rearranging the floating structures into spirals, circles, and flowing patterns. Elias observed each reaction, adjusting his approach to match her curiosity. Sometimes she hesitated, unsure of how to interact, and he simply stepped back, letting her explore on her own terms. Other times she reached for new patterns, clearly enjoying the challenge. By midday, the Grythian had begun to initiate interactions herself. She nudged pieces together in ways Elias had not predicted, creating shapes that were both intricate and harmonious. Her hums grew more musical, vibrating through the air and reaching even the farthest corners of the city. Citizens gasped as they realized that the Grythian, once considered indifferent or even dangerous, was actively engaging with her environment, and with Elias, in a playful, joyful manner. Elias noticed that her movements were becoming more deliberate. She seemed to be experimenting with cause and effect, testing the limits of her influence over the floating structures. When she discovered a new reaction, a shape that moved in unexpected ways, she paused and tilted her head, her expression one of genuine wonder. Elias marveled at this subtle display. Despite her enormous size and alien nature, she experienced curiosity and joy in ways not entirely unlike a human child. During a break in their interaction, Elias took the opportunity to study her more closely. Lorelia's massive eyes reflected the sunlight, revealing patterns of color that shifted subtly with her mood. Her hums, which had become almost musical, seemed to vary with her emotional state, richer and deeper when she was pleased, softer and lighter when curious or contemplative. Elias realized that he was beginning to understand not just her actions, but the emotions behind them. He decided to introduce a new element. From his toolkit, he produced several reflective panels, small and light enough for her to manipulate. Elias arranged them in a series of patterns, creating a path of light and shadow that shifted as the panels moved. He stepped back, giving Lorelia space to explore. She approached the panels carefully, brushing her fingertips across them and watching as the reflections danced across the ground. Her hums grew louder, more vibrant, and she began to rearrange the panels herself. Each movement created new patterns, and she seemed fascinated by the endless possibilities. Elias observed quietly, noting that the Grythian's engagement was now sustained for long periods. She was no longer merely curious. She was actively experimenting and enjoying the process. As the day progressed, Elias introduced gentle puzzles and challenges designed to stimulate her mind without frustrating her. He would arrange a series of floating shapes in a pattern, leaving gaps that she could complete in her own way. Sometimes she succeeded immediately, other times she experimented, moving pieces around until a pleasing configuration emerged. With each success, her hums became richer and more musical, resonating through the city like a symphony of joy. Citizens began to understand the transformation taking place. Where once they had watched with fear and caution, they now observed with admiration and hope. Lorelia was no longer a distant, impossible being. She was engaged, playful, and beginning to express something that resembled happiness. Children ran to the edge of safe viewing platforms, pointing excitedly as she interacted with the patterns, while artists sketched her movements, hoping to capture the beauty of the moment. Elias realized that their connection was deeper than he had anticipated. The Grythian had begun to anticipate his actions, responding almost intuitively to the patterns he created. She would nudge shapes into new configurations, experiment with light reflections, and even create her own sequences. It was a silent conversation, one of observation, action, and response. By late afternoon, Elias decided to test the limits of their engagement. He introduced a complex arrangement of floating shapes and light patterns, designed to respond dynamically to Lorelia's movements. The challenge required careful manipulation and an understanding of cause and effect. Lorelia approached the arrangement with curiosity, her massive hands hovering above the shapes. She began to experiment, moving one piece at a time and observing the resulting effects. When a shape responded in an unexpected way, she paused, tilted her head, and tried again. Her hums grew more expressive, shifting from simple tones to rich, layered vibrations. Elias watched in awe as she slowly mastered the challenge, her actions precise yet playful. For the first time, the Grithian's engagement extended beyond mere curiosity or delight. She was thinking, experimenting, and creating. Elias realized that he had not only captured her attention but had stimulated her mind. Lorelia was learning, adapting, and enjoying the process in a way that mirrored human problem-solving. As the suns began to set, casting a warm glow across the city, Elias reflected on the day's events. The Grithian, once considered impossible to please, had shown remarkable growth in both behavior and emotion. She had engaged with challenges, expressed curiosity, and even demonstrated a sense of joy. The transformation was remarkable, not through force, spectacle, or intimidation, but through patient observation, empathy, and carefully guided interaction. Lorelia, sensing the approaching evening, moved toward a quiet area outside the city. Elias followed, carrying a small set of floating shapes that responded to touch. He projected gentle patterns of light, and she interacted with them with care and curiosity. Her hums resonated softly through the air, a subtle song that seemed to communicate contentment. As darkness fell and the twin moons appeared, Elias realized that their bond was growing stronger. Lorelia had begun to trust him fully, responding to his gestures with patience and curiosity. She was no longer a distant, unknowable being. She was a partner in a shared exploration of creativity and understanding. The citizens of Zyphora, too, were beginning to see the change. They whispered among themselves, amazed at what was unfolding. The Grithian who had once caused fear and destruction was now a being capable of joy, playfulness, and engagement. Her hums carried through the city like a lullaby, bringing calm and wonder to all who heard. Elias spent the night planning the next steps. He knew that their journey was far from complete. Lorelia's moods were complex, and her attention could shift quickly. Yet he also understood that the foundation had been laid. Patience, empathy, and carefully guided interaction could create trust and joy even in beings once thought impossible to reach. Before resting, he approached Lorelia one last time. She was lying quietly, her massive form curled around several structures. Elias projected a soft pattern of light, and she responded with a gentle hum, brushing her fingers across the shapes. It was a quiet, simple exchange, yet it held profound meaning. Through careful observation, patience, and empathy, a human had reached the heart of a Grithian. And as Elias watched her interact with the light patterns, he realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would bring new challenges, discoveries, and opportunities for connection. But for the first time, the impossible seemed possible. Lorelia, the once unapproachable Grithian, was learning to trust, play, and even find joy in small, deliberate acts. And Elias knew that with patience and understanding, this bond could grow even stronger, creating a new era of cooperation, curiosity, and happiness on Zyphora. Under the twin moons, the human and the Grithian shared a quiet moment, a silent understanding passing between them. The journey was far from over, but they had taken another significant step towards something extraordinary. A bridge between species, built not with power or force, but with empathy, patience, and shared discovery. The morning sun bathed Zyphora in a gentle, golden glow, reflecting off the city's towers and gardens in shimmering patterns. Captain Elias Harrow awoke early, already considering the day ahead. The bond he had begun to form with Lorelia had grown stronger, but he knew there was more to explore. The Grithian's trust had deepened, Yet understanding her fully was a challenge that would require patience, observation, and creativity. Lorelia was already awake, her massive form stretched across a field outside the city. The ground trembled slightly with each movement, but there was a grace to her motions, a calm rhythm that had been absent in earlier encounters. Elias approached slowly, carrying a set of floating panels that could respond to touch, movement, and light. These panels were designed to be both simple and flexible, allowing Lorelia to experiment freely. "Good morning, Lorelia," he said softly, kneeling at a safe distance. "I have something new for you today. You can explore it however you like." The Grithian's eyes followed the floating panels, and a soft hum escaped her chest. Elias noticed the subtle changes in her tone, lighter, more musical than before. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers brushing the edges of the panels, causing them to shift and float in new patterns. Each movement produced a ripple of light, a gentle play of color that seemed to captivate her. Citizens of Zyphora had gathered at a safe distance, eager to witness the interaction. Children pointed excitedly, while artists and engineers observed with awe. For the first time, many realized that Lorelia was not only curious but capable of joy. She was exploring, experimenting, and responding to stimuli with an intelligence and creativity that had seemed impossible. Elias observed carefully, taking notes on her reactions. He had learned that Lorelia responded most positively when she could create, rather than simply observe. The floating panels allowed her to arrange patterns freely, producing unexpected shapes and combinations. She seemed particularly drawn to spirals and circles, arranging the panels in intricate sequences that shifted dynamically as she interacted. By midday, Elias decided to introduce a collaborative challenge. He positioned several panels to create a simple puzzle, a series of shapes that could be arranged to form a coherent pattern, but with multiple possible solutions. His goal was to encourage Lorelia to experiment, to combine her creativity with a sense of problem-solving. The Grithian approached cautiously, her massive eyes scanning the arrangement. She began moving the panels, testing different combinations. At first, her gestures were tentative, as if unsure of the rules. But soon she became more confident, exploring new possibilities and discovering unexpected patterns. Her hums grew louder, richer, and more musical, signaling delight and engagement. Elias stepped back, observing the transformation. Lorelia was no longer just curious. She was actively creating, experimenting, and enjoying the process. The bond between them had grown stronger, built not on commands or spectacle, but on shared exploration and understanding. As the day progressed, Elias introduced additional elements. Light beams, reflective surfaces, and small floating orbs added complexity and depth to the challenges. Lorelia responded with remarkable intelligence, moving objects in ways that produced harmonious patterns and new visual effects. She seemed to understand cause and effect, experimenting with combinations that surprised even Elias. Citizens watched in awe as the Grithian interacted with the environment. For many, it was a revelation. A being once considered distant and impossible to please could experience joy, curiosity, and creativity. Children began leaving small tokens at the edge of the safe zone, shiny stones, colorful plants, and simple toys, to see if Lorelia would notice. She did, carefully examining each offering, sometimes integrating it into her patterns, other times nudging it aside with gentle curiosity. Elias noticed that her gestures had become more deliberate, almost playful. She would nudge panels into new configurations, pause to observe the effect and adjust accordingly. Her hums varied in tone and rhythm, creating a rich, musical language of emotion and engagement. It was clear that she was expressing herself, not just reacting. Around mid-afternoon, Elias decided to take a risk. He proposed a cooperative creation, a project that required both human guidance and Grithian participation. Using a combination of floating panels, light patterns, and small reflective surfaces, he set up a scenario in which both he and Lorelia could contribute to a single, evolving design. She approached with curiosity, her massive eyes focused intently on the arrangement. Elias demonstrated how the panels could be manipulated to produce shifting patterns of light. Lorelia watched carefully, then began to experiment herself. Together, they created a dynamic display of color, light, and movement, a shared artwork that responded to both their actions. The process was slow, requiring patience and observation. Elias had learned that Lorelia needed space to explore at her own pace, and he allowed her the freedom to take the lead at times. She responded with increasing confidence, moving panels with grace and precision, and occasionally nudging him gently when she wanted to guide the arrangement in a new direction. Citizens of Zyphora were amazed. The collaboration between human and Grithian was unlike anything they had ever seen. Engineers took notes on the patterns, artists sketched the evolving shapes, and children watched in wide-eyed wonder. For many, it was a moment of inspiration, a demonstration that connection, empathy, and creativity could transcend size, species, and previous limitations. As evening approached, the cooperative artwork reached its peak. Panels, light patterns, and reflective surfaces formed an intricate design that shimmered and shifted with each movement. Lorelia emitted a soft, melodic hum, her voice resonating through the city like music. Elias observed her closely, noting the subtle cues in her gestures and sounds. She was clearly experiencing joy, and her trust in him had deepened significantly. With the moons rising, casting their soft glow over the city, Elias decided to introduce one final element for the day. He activated a set of floating orbs that responded to touch and movement, designed to create cascading effects of light and sound. Lorelia approached cautiously, her eyes widening in fascination as the orbs responded to her gestures. She moved them with care, producing a mesmerizing display of color and rhythm. The citizens of Zyphora watched in awe as the Grithian engaged fully with the interactive environment. Her hums and gestures created a living symphony of light and sound, a testament to her growing joy and creativity. Elias realized that their bond had reached a new level. Lorelia was not only participating, but initiating interaction, expressing herself, and enjoying the process fully. As night settled over Zyphora, Elias approached Lorelia one last time for the day. She was lying quietly among the panels and orbs, her massive form partially curled around the interactive elements. Elias projected a gentle light pattern, and she responded with a soft hum, nudging the shapes in subtle, deliberate ways. It was a quiet, peaceful exchange, a moment of mutual understanding and trust. Elias reflected on the day's events. The Grithian, once impossible to please, had discovered the joy of creation, exploration, and collaboration. Her trust in him had grown, and her engagement with the environment and the citizens of Zyphora was remarkable. Through patience, observation, and empathy, he had unlocked a new level of connection, one that promised even greater possibilities in the future. For the citizens, the transformation was equally profound. They had witnessed a being once feared as distant and indifferent become playful, creative, and joyful. The hums of Lorelia resonated through the city, bringing calm and inspiration to all who heard them. Children played nearby under careful supervision, leaving small objects for her to explore, while artists and engineers observed, taking inspiration from the Grithian's patterns and movements. Elias spent the night planning the next steps. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities for collaboration. He intended to introduce more complex interactive elements, designed to further stimulate Lorelia's creativity and problem-solving abilities. The goal was not to control her, but to provide opportunities for engagement, exploration, and mutual learning. Before resting, Elias approached Lorelia one final time. She lay quietly among the panels, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the floating orbs. Elias projected a gentle pattern of light, and she responded with a soft hum, nudging the shapes in subtle, precise ways. It was a quiet, simple exchange, yet it held profound meaning, a demonstration of trust, understanding, and shared joy. Through careful observation, patience, and empathy, a human had unlocked something extraordinary, the capacity for joy, creativity, and engagement in a Grithian. Elias understood that this bond was just the beginning. With continued care, guidance, and respect for her autonomy, Lorelia could discover new forms of expression, and humans could learn from her unique perspective. As the moons rose higher in the sky, casting their silver glow over the city, Elias allowed himself a quiet smile. The journey was far from complete, but they had taken another significant step towards something remarkable, a world where humans and Grithians could connect, collaborate, and create together. Lorelia, the once unapproachable Grithian, was discovering joy. She was learning to trust, to play, and to express herself in ways that transcended fear and distance. And Elias knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they could explore the limits of creativity, connection, and understanding, building a bridge between species that promised a future of harmony and shared discovery. The morning air on Zyphora was crisp and filled with a quiet excitement. Word had spread across the city that today would be extraordinary. Captain Elias Harrow had prepared a series of interactive challenges for Lorelia, designed to further develop her creativity, problem-solving, and collaboration with humans. For the citizens of Zyphora, who had watched the Grithian shift from distant and unpredictable to playful and engaged, this was a day of celebration, curiosity, and hope. Elias approached Lorelia cautiously, carrying a set of lightweight, responsive panels and a collection of floating light orbs. She was already awake, her massive form stretched across a large clearing outside the city. She observed him with her vast, shifting eyes, letting out a soft hum that vibrated through the ground. Elias smiled, acknowledging her with a gentle wave. "Good morning, Lorelia," he said softly. "Today we will try something new. We will work together, but you can take the lead whenever you like." The Grithian responded with a curious tilt of her head and a low hum, as if acknowledging the proposal. Elias arranged the panels in a wide circle, leaving space in the center for free interaction. The light orbs floated gently above, ready to respond to touch and movement. He knew that Lorelia thrived when given freedom and choice, and this setup was designed to encourage both creativity and cooperation. She stepped forward carefully, her massive feet pressing lightly into the soft ground. Elias observed her movements, noting the grace with which she approached despite her enormous size. The Grithian's hand hovered over the first panel, testing it lightly. The panel responded, shifting colors and patterns with her touch. She seemed delighted, her hum growing richer and more melodic. Citizens of Zyphora watched from safe vantage points, marveling at the scene. Children pointed excitedly, engineers whispered notes to one another, and artists sketched the evolving shapes and patterns. The Grithian, once feared for her immense size and unpredictable moods, now engaged with her environment in a playful, joyful manner. Elias introduced a simple puzzle, a series of panels arranged to form a coherent pattern, but with multiple possible solutions. Lorelia approached cautiously, examining the arrangement with careful attention. She began to experiment, moving panels in sequences, testing combinations, and observing the effects. Her hums shifted in tone as she worked, rising and falling with each discovery. As she explored, Elias contributed by projecting additional patterns of light, creating opportunities for dynamic interaction. Lorelia responded immediately, adjusting the panels to align with the new patterns. Together, human and Grithian were creating a living, shifting artwork, one that reflected their combined creativity and understanding. Hours passed as they worked together, experimenting with increasingly complex arrangements. Elias noticed that Lorelia began anticipating his gestures, moving panels in response to his projected patterns even before he adjusted them. Her hums became richer and more varied, forming a subtle, musical dialogue between them. The Grithian was no longer merely following prompts. She was collaborating, innovating, and expressing herself. Citizens observed in awe. The transformation of Lorelia was extraordinary. She had gone from a distant, seemingly impossible to please being to one who could engage creatively, express joy, and interact meaningfully with humans. Children, inspired by the scene, began leaving small objects at the edge of the safe zone, tokens for her to explore. Lorelia noticed each one, examining them carefully and occasionally integrating them into the evolving artwork. Elias realized that this level of engagement was unprecedented. The Grithian was demonstrating intelligence, creativity, and emotional expression in ways that had never been documented. He noted every subtle movement, every change in tone, and every playful interaction. This was a new era of understanding, a bridge between species built on patience, empathy, and mutual respect. By midday, Elias introduced another challenge. He scattered floating orbs across the clearing, each programmed to respond to touch with light and sound. Lorelia approached cautiously, her eyes wide with curiosity. She touched the first orb, causing it to emit a cascade of shimmering light. Her hums deepened in tone, vibrating with excitement and delight. She began experimenting, moving the orbs in sequences that created patterns of light and sound that were both intricate and beautiful. Elias contributed by projecting additional patterns of color and movement, guiding her subtly without restricting her freedom. Together, they created a complex, dynamic display that shifted and evolved with each interaction. Lorelia's expressions changed as she explored, her eyes reflecting fascination, joy, and curiosity. The Grithian was fully engaged, enjoying both the challenge and the collaboration. As the day progressed, Elias noticed a remarkable development. Lorelia began initiating new patterns on her own, combining elements in ways he had not anticipated. She nudged panels together, arranged orbs into spirals, and experimented with light projections, creating sequences that were both creative and harmonious. It was clear that she was thinking, exploring, and expressing herself independently. The citizens of Zyphora were amazed. The Grithian who had once caused fear and destruction was now engaged in playful creativity, collaborating with a human in ways that inspired awe and hope. Children cheered, artists sketched, and engineers observed carefully, taking notes for future study. Lorelia's hums resonated through the city, creating a sense of calm, wonder, and joy that had never been experienced before. Elias knew that the bond they had formed was extraordinary. The Grithian's trust in him had deepened, and her ability to express joy and creativity had grown. He realized that humans, small and seemingly fragile, possessed a unique ability to reach even the most imposing and enigmatic beings. Through patience, empathy, and thoughtful guidance, they could unlock potential that seemed impossible. By late afternoon, Elias proposed a final challenge for the day. He set up a collaborative sequence that required both human and Grithian contributions to complete. Panels, light patterns, and floating orbs were arranged to form a dynamic puzzle, one that could evolve only through coordinated effort. Lorelia approached cautiously, her massive eyes fixed on the arrangement. She began interacting with the panels, testing combinations and observing results. Elias responded with subtle gestures and projections, guiding without controlling. Together, they experimented, adjusted, and refined the patterns. Lorelia's hums became richer and more musical, forming a subtle dialogue that Elias could interpret through observation and intuition. Hours passed, and the collaborative artwork reached its peak. Panels shifted, light patterns danced, and orbs floated in intricate sequences, all responding dynamically to their combined actions. Lorelia emitted a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the city, a signal of joy, satisfaction, and engagement. Citizens watched in awe, understanding that this was more than a game or a demonstration. It was a living testament to connection, creativity, and trust. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the city, Elias approached Lorelia one final time. She lay among the panels and orbs, her massive form partially curled around the interactive elements. He projected a gentle pattern of light, and she responded with a soft hum, nudging the shapes in precise, deliberate ways. It was a quiet exchange, simple yet profound, demonstrating mutual understanding and respect. Elias reflected on the journey. From the first hesitant interactions to this moment of full collaboration, Lorelia had transformed. She had discovered joy, trust, and the thrill of creation. She had learned to engage with the environment and with humans in ways that had once seemed impossible, and he had witnessed the remarkable power of empathy, patience, and observation, the essence of human ingenuity. The citizens of Zyphora, too, had been transformed by the experience. They had seen fear replaced with wonder, uncertainty replaced with joy, and distance replaced with connection. Lorelia, the Grithian once feared and considered impossible to please, had become a symbol of hope, creativity, and the extraordinary potential of interspecies understanding. As night settled over the city, Elias considered the future. There would be more challenges, more opportunities for learning and collaboration. Lorelia's growth was ongoing, and her capacity for engagement, creativity, and joy seemed limitless. Humans and Grithians alike could continue to learn from one another, exploring new possibilities and expanding the boundaries of understanding. Before resting, Elias approached Lorelia once more. She lay quietly, her massive eyes reflecting the glow of the floating panels. He projected a gentle pattern of light, and she interacted with it with care and curiosity. Her hums resonated softly, a musical testament to trust, happiness, and mutual understanding. It was a moment of profound connection. A human had reached the heart of a Grithian, not through force, technology, or spectacle, but through empathy, patience, and shared exploration. Lorelia, once considered distant and impossible to please, had discovered joy, creativity, and trust. And Elias knew that this was only the beginning. Under the twin moons of Zyphora, human and Grithian lay amidst the floating panels and shimmering light, a quiet understanding passing between them. They had discovered something extraordinary together, the power of connection, collaboration, and empathy. Humans, though small in size, had demonstrated the ability to inspire, guide, and bring joy to a being of unimaginable scale and complexity. The future promised even greater possibilities. Lorelia's creativity could continue to grow, humans could continue to learn from her, and the bond they had formed could become a foundation for lasting harmony and collaboration. Together, they had taken the first steps toward a new era, a time when species could bridge differences through understanding, play, and shared discovery. And as the stars sparkled above and the twin moons cast their soft glow over Zyphora, Captain Elias Harrow allowed himself a quiet smile. The journey had been challenging, yet extraordinary. They had unlocked a potential that no one had thought possible. The impossible had become possible. A Grithian had learned to play, to create, and to trust a human. And in doing so, humans had proven once again their unique ability to connect, understand, and inspire even the most colossal and seemingly unreachable beings. In the stillness of the night, the hums of Lorelia resonated through the city, a gentle reminder of the power of empathy, patience, and creativity. For humans and Grithians alike, it was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with collaboration, joy, and limitless potential.